Hey, my friends, sorry it took so long to get here, but let's have an introduction to Spinoza's Ethics. We're reading book one. It's about 30 pages. It's available online for free if you don't have a copy of it. When you pick it up, you immediately notice the geometrical method that this book is following. What a weird thing to do, write a book of philosophy like it's a book of geometry. What is that getting for us, right? You might think, well, this means you're really getting demonstrations, you're really getting proofs. Maybe that's why the geometrical method's there, right? To really establish something. That seems to be the reason Descartes approaches this kind of method of writing. Spinoza is very much inspired by Descartes, and Descartes does start playing with this method in his objections and replies to the meditations. But then in the principles, he ends up following something a little bit different. But Spinoza is writing in a geometrical method. He begins with definitions and axioms, and then he gives us propositions that are demonstrated by those definitions and axioms and the previous demonstrations. Is the point of the geometrical method to get a certainty? It may well be, but as we finished the selections from the TTP that we read, we noticed this passage about Euclid, where Spinoza's drawing a sharp distinction between the difficulty we have reading the Bible, like any text, right? Reading the Bible is difficult to really understand it. You got to understand the authors, the audience, the culture, the language. There's so much that goes into interpreting a work, especially an ancient text. But Euclid, also ancient, Spinoza says, we have no such difficulty. Anyone can pick it up and follow along and follow the reasonings, right? As we take the definitions that Euclid gives us and think through the axioms and then follow the demonstrations for the propositions, we don't have any mysteries left. What could Euclid be talking about? Now, is it just because the subject matter allows it? Maybe. But the style of reasoning seems to lend itself to this kind of mathematical science where you're demonstrating something from definitions. Can we really reproduce that in philosophy? It's a good question. Spinoza does, right? He does reproduce that. Does it get us the certainty of Euclid? Or does it merely allow us to interpret the text more easily than if it were written in a more traditional philosophical style? This is a good question. You might find that Spinoza's not terribly persuasive, and that's pretty reasonable. After all, you can see in the definitions and in the axioms, right? You can kind of see where he's going. And you can see places where someone else might reject that definition or refine that definition or provide a different definition, right? It could be that so much of the ethics is just unpacking the definitions and that all the controversy really is, can we condense all the controversy into those definitions? If Spinoza's really successful, we should be able to distill all the controversy down into the definitions and see, to avoid his conclusions, we'll just avoid this definition and work with this different one. Could be. So I'm interested to know how you read it. When you come out of it, do you find yourself seeing the world the way Spinoza sees it? Or do we just have an easier time kind of stepping into Spinoza's language and Spinoza's view of things, given how careful he was with the definitions. As you open the Ethics, you'll notice a lot hinges on understanding of substance, attribute, and mode, and also the understanding of finitude and infinitude that Spinoza gives in these definitions and in these axioms. You can kind of see where he's going. Even from this first definition, you can kind of tell. You can kind of tell that there is a ontological argument kind of going on here, that we're going to have very quickly very strong reasons to think that there is an infinite being. The first definition Spinoza gives us says, by cause of itself, we can tell we're going to be talking about God, right? By cause of itself, I understand that whose essence involves existence, or that whose nature cannot be conceived except as existing. All right, so right off the bat, we're thinking about what does it mean for something to be cause of itself, to be the explanation of its own existence. And Spinoza gives us some definitions of finitude and infinity that have us starting to see that there really can only be one substance in existence, right? Spinoza says a substance is a thing that exists on its own, exists by itself, through itself. You can understand its existence through itself. And once you have these definitions down of what a substance is, it's going to be pretty clear. I mean, the propositions lay it out, right? That there can only really be one thing, one substance, one self-existing thing in reality. And that's a surprising result. Substances, right? I mean, we've been talking about substances in philosophy for millennia, right? Aristotle sees substances all over the place. I got my kitty cat sleeping here on the couch next to me. That's a substance over there. I'm a substance, a thing. I've got properties, right? There are facts about me. There are properties or attributes that belong to me, right? So bipedal. Right? I have two legs, thankfully. Bipedal is a fact about me, still, right? It's a attribute that I have. Now, this isn't exactly how Spinoza is going to use the word attribute. But for Aristotle, bipedal is truly attributed to me. I am the substance, and bipedal is a property that I have. So substances are the things that other things can be said of for Aristotle. And there's lots of substances, right? I see my brown chair over there. It's brown. Brown is a property that belongs to the chair. Lots of substances that can have properties. Now Spinoza is going to say there's really only one substance. But what can we say about that substance? Well, an attribute is the saying of, in a way. Definition 4, Spinoza says, by attribute, I understand what the intellect perceives of a substance as constituting its essence. Its essence, right? So an attribute is the essence of a kind of substance. So Spinoza, being very influenced by Descartes, right? We can understand in Descartes there are two fundamentally different kinds of substances. There's extended substance, bodies. An extension is an attribute for Descartes and for Spinoza. And then there's thinking substances, minds. Thought, also, for Descartes and for Spinoza, is an attribute. So we can identify something as a thinking substance or something as an extended substance. These are the essences that make those kinds of things what they are. But notice, for Spinoza, it's not exactly a fact about the substance that its essence is thought or extension. It's a fact about how the mind constitutes the essence of that substance. So it's a fact about how we recognize a substance as being of a certain kind. Okay, so thought is something that we recognize to be an attribute of thinking substances. Extension is something we recognize to be the essence of bodily substances. Okay, but for Spinoza, we're going to find that there's only one substance. Only one substance. But there's two kinds. That's peculiar. We'll have to make sense of that soon. Sorry. But now let's talk about modes. This is definition 5. By mode, I understand the affections of a substance. Affections, affects. That's an important word for this text, and we'll have to think more about what he means by that. But by mode, I understand the affections of a substance, or that which is in another through which it is also conceived. That which is in another through which it is also conceived. Okay, so here I've got my brown book, all right? It is an extended thing. It is, a Cartesian would say it's a substance, it's a physical substance. And it is a physical substance with the attribute of extension, and that attribute of extension includes a certain length, a certain shape. Oh, and a new shape. The shape that's coming and going, right? It's a part of the extension. It's a part of the attributes of what it is to be this thing, but it can have different affects at different times. It can change those affects, can change those modes. So these impermanent things that come and go and are understood through the thing that it's a part of, these are the affects. These are the modes or modifications, okay? So Spinoza and Descartes, and seems to be David Gorlais, someone who no one knows hardly a thing about. I think Christoph Luthi wrote a book about David Gorlais, but there's not a whole lot of David Gorlais stuff out there. But these modern thinkers, instead of thinking about things in terms of substantial form and matter, we're trying to think of things in terms of substance and mode, right? The properties, the modifications, the way that substance is at that particular time. All right, so Spinoza is going to take us from these definitions of substance, attribute, mode, the finite and the infinite, and how things are understood through themselves or through something else, and eventually be arguing that for each attribute, there can only be one substance. So for extension, taking up space, ultimately, the whole of the extended reality has to be just one substance. And the same for every attribute. And then he's going to argue that all these attributes are just descriptions of the same one substance from another attribute. That gets complicated and confusing. We'll slow down and take a look at it together, and I can't wait to answer your questions. But what we're going to be reading here, what you're reading here in Ethics Book 1, is his account of the totality of reality. He calls it God, but he also calls it nature. God or nature, actually, he ends up calling it. So understanding substance, understanding reality from this big picture, and it's a monist reality, there's only one thing. Then we start thinking about how reality is, how reality operates, the necessity of things, that everything follows from the nature of nature. Isn't that fun? Towards the end of Book 1, he gives us this result that he thinks is rather important for us, that it's going to be an important result for the moral parts, the parts of the ethics leading us towards blessedness, and that's Proposition 33 towards the end here of Book 1. Things could have been produced by God in no other way and in no other order than they have been produced. Now, if you get bogged down in the formal writing, the demonstrations, the geometric order, skip. I mean, read it; it's good, but don't sleep on the appendix to Book 1 of the Ethics. All right, so he's in Book 1 of the Ethics, giving us this big picture view of reality. That's eventually going to be important for understanding ourselves, but we're not really in this yet. Big picture of reality. What does this have to do with God? He keeps talking about God, but he's, working through his own definitions. So it would be really nice if he broke this order for a bit to talk about what's the relationship between this God he's mentioning and like a religious God. So he does. The appendix to Book 1. What are people getting right? What are people getting wrong about God? And Spinoza tries to show us the extent to which our thinking about God is infected with superstition, and some wonderful arguments there. Let's read it. Let's talk about it. Actually, tomorrow, Wednesday. Sorry, I'm so late on this.